So you may be wondering about why there's all this commotion in the media recently about COVID fines and with the government. Well, I'm here to explain this to you guys. So what happened was that during 2020, and obviously through 2021 as well, there were at least 3 lockdowns in the UK in an effort to combat the coup. We were told initially, before there was any lockdowns, before there was even any plans, that we were going to have a Sweden-style open economy, open society, where things were not going to be locked down, businesses were not going to be closed, you could do whatever you want. Life would go on normally, the individual will decide how to deal with the situation at hand. This created a massive backlash in the media, which was fueled by certain elements in the government who were in full panic card mode, and the likes of Sage, who had their own reasons for wanting to do this because they were very influenced by Chi-Coms. This resulted in Boris Johnson backpedaling and ushering in the first lockdown, and then consistently backtracking on trying to keep things open and free until eventually this year, finally, no more lockdowns. But during those lockdowns, the politicians decided to think that they were above their own rules, which you would expect, and decided to, well, have some Christmas parties, go around and break the rules, drive wherever they want. Famously, for example, Dominic Cummings was accused of breaking lockdown rules when he was driving from the south to Durham, I think it was. And then obviously at Christmas there were a lot of parties going on which were not allowed because Christmas was cancelled by the Tory party. There were Tory MPs who decided to have their own little get-together. In fact, it was quite a big one. There was quite a lot of famous, big Tory members were there. When all this came out, in fact, it was hidden from us by the media and even by the government until it was convenient, funnily enough. Then the public was outraged. How could they do this? How could they break their own rules? This is absurd. This is terrible. Where is the accountability for our ministers? Leading the charge was, of course, Her Majesty's opposition, Labour. Months later, after people have been fined and arrested for sitting on park benches, sitting around in park, socially distancing away from people, not even necessarily being with other people, having their bags searched during the early lockdown days because the police took the rules so literally that when they say only go for absolutely necessary reasons, like for food, they were checking your bags to make sure that you weren't buying anything that was not deemed important. I think you get the gist. The government punished the people for the most minor infractions and then backtracked on them and then re-engaged in punishing people, which confused us all even more, and yet wouldn't punish themselves at the time when they actually broke the rules. So now, in 2022, when the country is opened up again, finally and hopefully forever, now they start punishing themselves. The police has handed out 50 fines for Partygate. Yes, this was deemed so important, it was named after Watergate. And Labour were furious, saying that Boris Johnson should resign for breaking his own rules, for allowing his party to fall out of line. Only, oh dear, it turns out that Keir Starmer also had his own little party. In fact, he was snapped having a beer in Durham itself. Funny that, isn't it? And in fact, he wasn't the only Labour Party member there. This was probably not the only function that Labour Party members were involved in. Keir Starmer has even said that he will resign if he is found guilty of breaking COVID rules. My personal opinion is he won't. I think he will just decide to not resign and hope that people forget. And I think a lot of people will because they just want to get along with their own lives at this point. All of this is just kabuki theatre. This is just the government self-flagellating themselves to show to us that actually, yes, they do have accountability, that yes, they are definitely not above the rules, and that in the future they will behave themselves if another pandemic happens and they have to lock us all down again. They're so afraid of losing popularity, I mean, as if the whole pandemic didn't utterly destroy it, at least for a couple of years anyway, that they're deciding to show to us that yes, they are actually good people, they are accountable politicians, and they are not above the rules. When actually they've shown us that they are above the rules, they will break them whenever they see fit, and it was purely for us, and that all these lockdown rules, all these guidelines weren't actually following science, as we now find out, were not following common sense, and it was just, well, for their own gain. It was for either Sage's gain, the Prime Minister's gain and his Cabinet's gain, and Labour were taking full advantage of it themselves, so they can't claim to be the party of the little man of the people when they were doing the exact same things. It's all about trying to trick you and me into thinking that these people are alright despite breaking the rules. And the thing is, why punish themselves now after the pandemic is slowly fading from memory as cases drop? It is slightly strange that they would do so. It was probably because of the local elections that was going on only a few weeks ago, but I can't say for certain. I think they're just hoping to try and claim back as much goodwill as they possibly can from the public, because, you can't continue using COVID and stuff like that forever and ever. It's just not going to happen. The pandemic is essentially over in this country at this point. It is now endemic. No one is going to resign because of this. Some people might get fined. Politicians get fined all the time for speeding and all sorts. But the thing is, fines don't really cut it though, do they, for what they actually did to the British people for those 2 years. They may not get away with having parties, but they get away with the policies that set back the country economically and caused the needless deaths of people who didn't need to die in the first place. So just be aware, everyone, that when politicians in your own country start to arbitrarily punish themselves, that is to create the veneer of accountability where there is none. You don't live in a country that has accountability. You live under an oligarchy that decides that they don't need to follow their own rules because they're the anointed ones. Hey, but don't take my word for it. Take the word of the Tory party members I used to argue with, who said that because they're the leaders, they get to do whatever they want. Well, I guess they do get to do whatever they want, but the consequences will come for them eventually. Not the most wise thing to say, is it? And they definitely wouldn't be saying that if Labour were in charge. So anyway, until next time, it's been your boy, and I'll see you all later.